everyone, I'm doing another Booktube tag today, and this time it is the Mid-Year Freakout Tag. I'm not exactly sure why we're freaking out, except I guess it's the middle of the year and so much time has passed and that feels crazy. I guess that's why it's called that. Question 1 is the best book you've read so far in 2021, and if you've been following my YouTube channel from the beginning, you already know it. Silmarillion, not even a hard question for me. I read this right at the beginning of the year, and it is currently my favorite fiction book of all time. I will be really impressed if a fiction book ever tops this. It is especially awesome because of Lord of the Rings. I probably wouldn't appreciate it nearly as much without Lord of the Rings, but even just on its own, it is amazing. It has some of the best world building ever done. It's just so intricate and detailed. It has amazing characters, which I didn't really see coming. I thought that the characters would be fairly stock and that they would just be there to be archetypes, but they're actually really interesting as people. I love seeing how everything built toward Lord of the Rings. The ending is just incredible. I was absolutely blown away. The writing of the whole thing is poetry. This is one of those books that is really intimidating for a writer to read because it's like, how will I ever? And Tolkien spent so many years working on this. He spent decades on these stories, rewriting them over and over and over to make them better, and it paid off because this is definitely my best read of the year so far. Have I been saying 2021? It's 2022. I know what year it is. Question 2, best sequel you've read so far in 2022. And I talk a lot about sequels on my channel, so this is a good question for me. Another really easy one to answer is this guy that I've already, again, made a video about this, so I will link to that video with more of my thoughts on Speaker for the Dead. It is, spoiler, one of the sequels that I definitely easily consider even better than the original. And I thought that the original Ender's Game was great. But Speaker for the Dead, it's even better. Adult Ender, deep themes, cool world building, great plot, great characters. I am ready to read it again. And it's not even long, it's short. It's like you can quickly read it and it packs a bigger punch than most 1,000-page books that I've read. Question 3, new release you haven't read yet but want to. Can I count one that is not quite released yet? Cause the Wonderland Trials is coming out on July 12th. And I keep wanting to read that because it's written by Sarah Ella, and she's one of my instructors in the Author Conservatory, so I really want to read the book that she wrote most recently, and it is Dystopian Alice in Wonderland, which I think is an interesting premise. So I would like to read that one. I have no idea when I'm going to get around to it, but it is coming out soon, and it has a really cool cover, and it will definitely be on my TBR. Then the next question is most anticipated release for the second half of 2021. There's one that I'm really excited about that is also coming out on July 12th that I will talk about in a minute. But as far as books that are coming out a little bit later, did I say 21 again? I'm looking at a list that says 21 on it because it's from last year. So if I keep saying that, sorry. I'm just reading. It's what people do on Booktube, they read. Definitely anticipating Wishdress by Nadine Brandes because I've been waiting, I think it's 3 years for another book from Nadine, and I'm really ready for another one. I liked her Out of Time series back in 2019. That was my first introduction to her. And Fox and Romanov I've also read. Fox is my favorite, like Thomas's character. The climax, I'm very picky about book climaxes, so when a climax really impresses me and feels like it genuinely brought every aspect of the book together into one event and just knocked it out of the park with that singular moment that was just perfect. Fox did that for me, so that is my favorite Nadine book, and I'm ready for it again in Wishdress. And I've heard from at least one person who's read an advanced reader copy already and said that it's Nadine's best book yet, and I like the cover. I think it is entirely possible that this is Nadine's best book yet, so I'm really excited for that in September. Question 5, biggest disappointment. And I've got to say it was Foundation by Isaac Asimov, which some people might be kind of angry about. I was really surprised how much I did not like this book because I'd heard so many good things about it, and this was during my classic sci-fi binge that I'm kind of still on. Foundation is one of like the most classic sci-fi books, and I was like, hey, that premise is cool, and famous author, this is gonna be great. And I was so underwhelmed and surprised because I didn't relate to a single character like at all. And the POV character in the first 2 chapters, I was kind of starting to relate to. I was like, okay, he's kind of interesting. Okay, I can follow this person. And then it's like part 2, decades later, and we're with a completely different set of characters. It's like, oh, okay, I guess that was kind of like the prologue, and now we're in the main book. And so I read a few more chapters, and it's like part 3, several more decades later, and then we're with some of the same characters, but a lot of them have also died, and now they're old. And so it's like constantly jumping to new sets of characters, and it didn't ever give me a chance to connect with any of them. And the characters that we do see are like so hard and cold and just purely logic, purely pragmatic. None of them have any emotions at all. There aren't really any relationships between people in the book. I don't really think there are any female characters at all, which just means that there's a whole side of potential character dynamics that aren't even there. I just found it really boring, despite the fact that it has this interesting premise, and technically the stakes are huge because the universe is at stake, but I didn't really care because I didn't know any of the people in the universe at this point, and it just did not connect with me at all. It was a really short book, but it still took me quite a while to finish it. It felt like a long book to me, even though it was so few chapters, because I just felt like nothing was happening that I really cared about or was interested in. It was just like all darkness and galactic domination and people who only care about themselves. I'm not even sure they care about themselves. They're just trying to preserve their own lives for some reason. So if you're a big fan of Foundation, please let me know what's so great about it, and I mean that because I want you to help me love it. I would really like to love this series. Maybe the later books in the series are better. Maybe that sequel is better than the original. I don't know. If you're a Foundation fan, I want to hear the full argument for Foundation and why I'm wrong about it and why the characters are actually fantastic people. That would be great. Question 6 is biggest surprise. I think that would be The Seventh Son by Lonnie Forbes. I only read it because I got it for free for signing up for a conference. Not that I thought it would be bad exactly, I just did not think it was going to be my thing. I am very tired of Christian YA fantasy. I've read a lot of it, and I'm tired of it. I got burned out on it, and it sounded pretty heavy on the romance, and I was like, that's not my thing either. So I was like, okay, it won a Realm Award, great. It's probably fine for what it is. Probably just not really gonna be for me. But then I got it for free, and I was like, well, it's a free book. I'm not gonna not read a free book. So I did read it, and I was so surprised. Like, right away, I was like, okay, this is not as bad as I thought. This might actually be decent. And then I just, like, kept finding myself wanting to read it and kept finding myself want to read it. And I finished it, like, so fast. I would read huge chunks of it at once. I liked the characters. They were human. All of them, even the side characters, were really interesting. And at the summit that I signed up for, that I got this book for free, at the Story Ember Summit, Lonnie Forbes taught a session on side characters, and I was like, well, she's the right person to do it because she's really good at them. And it made the plot so much more interesting because it's this competition. It's pitched as like The Selection meets The Hunger Games, which also really did not make me think that I would like it. But it's like this competition to be selected by the prince to be the new queen, basically. And when you care about all of the contestants, it's like, okay, I'm actually not sure how I want this to go down. I'm really not sure how they're going to solve this problem exactly. And I actually thought that The Seventh Son did a better job than The Hunger Games with those stakes of, like, but what's gonna happen to the other contestants? Like, even if the main character wins, and, like, guys, we know the main character is gonna win, but even so, like, but what's going to happen to the other girls? Like, their lives are in danger, too. And the book did a really good job of acknowledging all of the moral dilemmas involved in that, and the main character didn't always deal with them correctly, and that was addressed and acknowledged, and she had to deal with that and grow through that. The world building, I thought, was really cool. It was really immersive, lots of sensory details, and it's like a South American inspired setting, which is really unique for fantasy, at least for fantasy that I've read. So I ended up really enjoying it. I haven't read the sequel yet, but it definitely made me want to read the rest of the books in the series, which surprised me. I was still not huge on the romance aspect. There was a little bit more of it than I would have liked, but for what was there, I was like, okay, I like this a lot more than I thought that I was going to. Question 7 is new favorite author, which is a little hard to say because I've read a lot of repeat authors this year. And I've read a lot of authors as like, I like their books, but then I didn't go read everything else that they've written, so I don't know if they count as my favorite authors. But I guess for this one, I'll talk about Jennifer A. Nielsen, my namesake, because I read this book and pretty immediately ordered the next 2 in the series from the library. This is such a beat up copy of the book. I did not do this. It was like this when I got it from the library. But anyway, I had so much fun with this. I hadn't read a middle grade fantasy in a while. It's about an orphan thief character, and I was like, okay, this will probably be pretty tropey. And it kind of is tropey, but it also twists a lot of the tropes. It's a really interesting plot with a lot of mystery as they try to figure out what's really going on, and there's all this court intrigue, and what does this noble really want, and what does this noble really want. And again, I guess it's a little bit like the Seventh Son, in that there's sort of a competition. We all know the main character is going to win, but like I care what's going to happen to the other characters and what the fallout of that is going to be for the rest of the world. The villain slash antagonist character was pretty interesting. I was never quite sure what to expect from him. I'm really interested to see where this goes next. It was such a quick read. The pacing was so good. It just made me want to keep reading and keep reading. I definitely could have hit this one all in one sitting. It was just so fast-paced. It kept moving. It kept ending chapters, not necessarily with like annoying cliffhangers, but with something that would just really make me want to know what happens next. So yeah, Jennifer A. Nielsen. Had not read her stuff before. We'll be reading more of it. Question 8 is newest fictional crush. I don't feel like I've ever really had a fictional crush because that would just feel weird to me because the person is not real. That would kind of be like having a crush on your imaginary friend, and that does not sound very healthy. And also, a lot of fictional characters like already have love interests, so that would just feel really, really weird. But the question after that is newest favorite character. So I can kind of combine those, I guess. Although, again, it's a little bit hard because some of my favorite characters from these books, like Ender from Speaker for the Dead, one of my favorite fictional characters ever, but he's not like a new favorite character because I read Ender's Game a while ago, before this year. So I guess newest favorite character, I don't know, might be like Feanor from the Silmarillion or something, although he's really annoying and frustrating, but he's also really interesting to read about. And he's kind of a dark character. He does so much stuff wrong, and it's interesting to read about an elf doing wrong things like that, like a Tolkien elf just really blowing it and being a terrible person. Tolkien elves in The Lord of the Rings most of the time are presented as very wise and good and kind, and you know, maybe a little bit hard to get along with sometimes, but generally they're very much the good guys. So seeing Feanor just really, really kind of destroy everything is a little bit surprising, but we understand why he's doing it, and we get to watch this journey. I find negative change arcs for characters really fascinating, so that turned into kind of an odd answer to that question, but Feanor is interesting. A really unexpected element of the Silmarillion for me that made it a much more interesting book than it could have been. Question 10. Book that made you cry. These boys, again. Probably about the only ones. And I wasn't like straight up bawling with either of these, but I definitely teared up at the end of the Silmarillion, where it ties into the end of Lord of the Rings, where they both might involve characters getting in ships and sailing off beyond the walls of the world. Especially after everything that happened in the Silmarillion, and the explanation of like what Valinor is, and how the world was diminished, and why people can't usually sail to Valinor, and then how people do sail into the West. I'm getting a little bit choked up right now. And then, yeah, Speaker for the Dead, too, at the end of this. I kept guessing what was going to happen in the climax. There were a couple things that I thought like that could happen and that would be really sad, but I almost hope that doesn't happen because I guessed it and that would be a little disappointing. So yeah, what I guess did not happen. It was kind of the inverse of what I expected, which is like my favorite kind of plot twist right there, where I thought something like this would happen, but it's kind of the opposite of what I thought would happen. And yeah, just this thing that Ender does at the end. Yeah, I definitely got teary with that one. I don't know if any other books have really made me cry this year. I mean, I choke up from books pretty easily, but like shedding multiple tears pretty much only happens if it's the Wing Feather Saga. Okay, number 11, book that made you happy. One that I picked for this, I could have picked a lot of books for this, but one that came to mind was And Then There Were None, Agatha Christie, which I feel like it's a little weird to say this book made me happy because it's about 10 murders. But it's also a murder mystery, and it's, you know, it's not quite the same thing if it's a murder mystery. It's not like the people dying made me happy, but Agatha Christie made me happy because she is so smart. And yeah, it just kept me guessing. I was really hoping that I would be able to solve it ahead of time. I definitely came to this book like a challenge, like, I'm gonna win this game, I'm gonna figure it out beforehand, I'm gonna figure out what's gonna happen, and I did not succeed at that challenge. I mean, I thought I had it, and like at one point I did have it right, but then she did this thing that convinced me that I was wrong again. So yeah, I kind of failed. But I hadn't read a book like this in a long time. It was a nice switch up from fantasy and sci-fi, something just really different. It's short. I think I read it in just 2 sittings, and almost all of it was in 1 sitting. I don't usually stay up late for books, actually, but this one I did. I was like, I'm not going to be sleeping if I don't finish this book. So yeah, it was kind of like an intellectual puzzle as well as a story, but it also managed to have like a pretty cool theme at the same time, and like not exactly, well no, it did have like some really cool negative character arcs. So again, negative character arcs are interesting, and this book has some cool ones. So in a kind of dark way, I guess that made me happy. Question 12, favorite book to movie adaptation you've seen so far this year. This one is also easy. I really like Dune as a movie adaptation. I read the book last year, really enjoyed it. I actually called it my favorite book of 2021, and I do mean 2021 this time, and I thought the movie adaptation did it justice, surprisingly. It's a lot of book to turn into a movie. Even half of the book is a lot to turn into one movie. I think they did a really good job of distilling down the essence of the book into something that was achievable for a movie, and they communicated all of the most important parts really clearly. I felt like they kept the feel of the book and the atmosphere. I wouldn't really have changed just about anything about it. I am excited for part 2. I think it's going to be good. Question 13, favorite review you've written this year. Now this one is pretty easy because I think I've only actually written 1 review this year, but I wanted to talk about this book anyway, so that's fine. And that is The Star That Always Stays by Anna Rose Johnson, who is my friend in the author conservatory. But even if she weren't, I would still have loved this book because it is really good. It's a middle grade historical fiction. It's based on Anna Rose's family. It's based on her ancestors. And as I talked about in the review, it is so much fun to read. It is lighthearted in a lot of ways, but it is also really honest and real about some hard things, like the main character Norvia. Her parents are divorced. She has Indian heritage, and she feels like she can't tell anyone because she would be ostracized even by her stepfather. And she misses her birth father, and she's trying to get along with her new stepbrother, who is hilarious, and her sister is also hilarious. But they're also really deep people, too. They're really layered, and I had so much fun reading it. It's not really my typical read. It has some aspects of, like, teenage drama and school crushes and stuff. That's not really my thing. I wouldn't typically read that, so those aspects of the book I didn't enjoy as much maybe, but overall I really, really loved it. Even though it's not fantasy, it was still super fun. It has some like mythology from the Ojibwe tribe that almost felt like fantasy because it feels kind of magical. So that was cool. I liked learning about that history, and I love the characters. Dicta especially had me in stitches. She's hilarious. She feels like a real 8-year-old, and I don't find that much in books where kid characters actually feel like real kids, but Dicta did. So great job, Anna Rose. Question 14, almost done. Okay, most beautiful book you bought this year. Probably this one. Probably my H.G. Wells collection, which has The War of the Worlds. That's the only one that I've read so far. And it has The Invisible Man, First Men in the Moon, The Time Machine. Also part of my classic sci-fi binge. And for some reason I just used the receipt for a bookmark, even though I have a ton of other bookmarks. So that kind of messes up the amazing appearance of the book. But it also has like really cool illustrations at the beginning of each book. Here's the one for The Invisible Man. And it has really, really nice interior formatting too. It looks great on the inside, like very sci-fi and very classic. It seems like the really pretty books tend to be more like fantasy or older historical fiction or something. I don't see a lot of sci-fi books that are this cool, but I think it's got really neat colors. It's kind of shiny. It's just a really sturdy hardback. So I really like this book. I got it at Half Price Books. I think it was like $10. Okay, last question, number 15, and this one could take all day, but it won't, don't worry. What books do you really need to read by the end of the year? Obviously, I won't list every book that I want to read by the end of the year. Some that I definitely think that I will make time for. Rhythm of War. I just finished Oathbringer, so Rhythm of War is definitely going to be read soon. Like I said, the next books in the Ascendant series after The False Prince, it's Runaway King, The Shadow Throne. I also have Coral by Sarah Ella on hold at the library. I want to read Fantasties by George MacDonald because lorehaven.com has a reading guild that is going to be going through that soon. I'll link to that in the description because I'm guessing that a lot of you, if you have not checked out Lorehaven yet, you'd probably love it. You should check it out. So I'll be reading those books. I'm reading Coral for Story Ember's July reading, and I'll link to that too. That's another place that a lot of you would probably enjoy a bunch. I don't know what else I'm going to read. I want to read Rage of Dragons. I am finishing up Skyward Flight, which is the novellas from the Cytoverse by Brandon Sanderson. So yeah, we'll see what else I actually read this year, but those are some of the big titles on my TBR. Okay, that does it for today. Let me know your favorite and least favorite reads from this year so far, and let me know what you're excited to read in the rest of the year. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!